Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Birthday Humiliation. Alex Johnson had always prided himself on being a patient man. 20 years in the military had taught him the value of calculated restraint, of observing before acting. But as he watched his 8-year-old son Tommy's face crumble at the sight of his birthday cake, Alex felt something cold and final settle in his chest. Sarah Johnson stood in the kitchen doorway, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early morning hour, watching their son with barely concealed amusement. The cake she presented was clearly dog food, chunks of brown meat and vegetables molded into a rough cake shape with a single candle stuck in the center. "It's just a joke," Sarah laughed, her voice carrying that particular edge it had developed over the past year. "Come on, Tommy, where's your sense of humor?" Alex's father, Ralph Johnson, held up his phone, recording everything with the enthusiasm of a man who'd found the perfect story for his weekly poker game. At 72, Ralph had never been one to show affection to his only grandchild, but this seemed particularly cruel even for him. "This is priceless," Ralph chuckled, adjusting his angle to get Tommy's tears in frame. "Wait until the boys at the VFW see this." Margie Johnson, Alex's mother, stood beside her husband, her arms crossed and a smirk playing at her lips. "He's used to eating trash anyway," she said with a laugh. "I've seen what Sarah packs in his lunch." The words hit Alex like a physical blow, but not because they were unexpected. His mother had always favored Sarah over him, had always made it clear that she thought his wife was too good for him. What shocked him was the casual cruelty directed at Tommy, his innocent son who was already struggling with being the smallest kid in his grade. Alex said nothing, just smiled. The same smile he'd worn when enemy combatants had thought they'd gotten the better of him in Afghanistan. The same smile that had preceded some of his most decisive victories. Tommy ran from the room, his small footsteps echoing up the stairs, followed by the slam of his bedroom door. Sarah shrugged and began preparing her real breakfast, Greek yogurt and granola, the same pristine meal she'd eaten every morning for the past 3 years. "You could have at least waited until after school," Alex said quietly, his voice carrying no emotion. "Oh, please," Sarah rolled her eyes. "It's not like he won't get over it. Kids are resilient. Besides, maybe this will toughen him up a little. He's too soft." Ralph lowered his phone, finally stopping the recording. "Your wife's got a point, Alex. The boy needs some backbone. When you were his age, we would have laughed right along with a joke like that." Alex remembered being 8 years old. He remembered his parents' idea of humor, their casual cruelty disguised as character building. He'd sworn his own children would never experience that. Yet here they were, 3 generations of Johnsons, and nothing had changed. "I'm going to check on Tommy," Alex said, heading toward the stairs. "Don't coddle him," Sarah called after him. "He needs to learn that the world isn't going to hand him everything on a silver platter." Alex paused at the bottom of the stairs, his hand gripping the banister. Sarah had no idea what the world had handed Alex, what he'd fought for, what he'd earned through blood and determination. She had no idea what he was capable of when pushed too far. He found Tommy face down on his bed, his small body shaking with quiet sobs. Alex sat on the edge of the bed and placed a gentle hand on his son's back. "I'm sorry about that, buddy," Alex said softly. "That wasn't right." Tommy turned over, his face red and streaked with tears. "Why did Mom do that? It's my birthday." Alex felt something fundamental shift inside him. Looking at his son's confused, hurt expression, he realized that this moment would define everything that came after. Tommy would remember this birthday for the rest of his life. He'd remember how his mother had humiliated him, how his grandparents had laughed, and how his father had responded. "Sometimes adults make bad choices," Alex said carefully. "But I want you to know that what happened downstairs wasn't about you. You didn't do anything wrong. Is Mom going to make me a real cake?" Alex pulled his son into a hug, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, feeling the delicate bones of his shoulders. "I'll make sure you get the birthday you deserve," he promised. "I'll handle everything." After Tommy had calmed down and Alex had helped him get ready for school, Alex returned downstairs to find Sarah on her phone, laughing at something on the screen. His parents had left, but Ralph's words echoed in his mind. "This is priceless." "Sarah," Alex said quietly. She didn't look up from her phone. "What? Who were you texting?" Now she glanced up, her expression shifting to mild annoyance. "Just a friend." "What?" Alex had been married to Sarah for 10 years. He knew her tells, her micro-expressions, the way her voice changed when she was lying. He also knew that she'd been increasingly distant over the past year, increasingly critical of both him and Tommy. He'd attributed it to stress from her job at the marketing firm, but now he wondered if there was more to it. "Nothing," he said, maintaining that same calm smile. "I just wanted to know if you were sharing the video of our son's humiliation with anyone else." Sarah's cheeks flushed slightly. "It was just funny, Alex." "God, you're so sensitive. It's not like I posted it on social media or anything." But she had shared it with someone she was comfortable enough with to send a video of their family's private moment. Someone who would appreciate the humor in a child's disappointment. "I'm going to pick up a real cake for Tommy after work," Alex said. "Fine," Sarah shrugged. "Waste the money. But don't expect me to pretend it's some grand gesture." The joke was harmless. Alex nodded and headed to the garage. As he drove to work, he thought about his son's tears, his wife's casual cruelty, his parents' laughter. He thought about the life he'd built, the family he'd tried to protect, the woman he'd trusted with his heart and his child's well-being. By the time he reached his office at the construction company he'd built from nothing after leaving the military, Alex had made a decision. Some betrayals were too deep to forgive. Some wounds were too deliberate to heal. He'd spent 20 years learning patience in the military, but he'd also learned something else: how to plan, how to execute, and how to win when winning mattered most. Sarah and whoever she was texting had no idea what they'd set in motion with their cruel joke, but they would learn. Chapter 2: The Discovery. Alex Johnson's construction company, Apex Building Solutions, occupied a modest office complex on the industrial side of town. He'd built it from the ground up after his military discharge, leveraging his engineering background and leadership experience into a thriving business that specialized in high-end residential projects. The work was honest, profitable, and provided him with the resources to give his family a comfortable life. More importantly, it had taught him how to investigate. In construction, you learned to spot problems before they became disasters. You developed an eye for structural weaknesses, for signs that something wasn't built to last. You learned to ask the right questions and verify every detail, because people's lives depended on your thoroughness. As Alex sat in his office that afternoon, he applied those same skills to his marriage. Sarah's phone records were easy enough to access. They shared a family plan, and Alex was the primary account holder. What he found made his jaw tighten with something that went beyond anger into a realm of cold, calculating fury. Hundreds of texts over the past 8 months to a number registered to Brett Young. The frequency had increased dramatically in recent weeks, with exchanges happening at all hours of the day and night. The content preview function showed fragments. "Can't wait to see you. He's so clueless. Soon we won't have to hide anymore." Alex pulled up Brett Yang's social media profiles. 34 years old, fitness instructor at Elite Fitness downtown, divorced with no children. His Instagram was full of shirtless photos, motivational quotes about living authentically, and comments from women that made it clear he had quite a following. But it was a photo from 3 weeks ago that made Alex's blood run cold. Brett Young and Sarah Johnson, clearly taken at some upscale restaurant, her hand resting on his arm, both of them gazing at each other with the intensity of new lovers. Sarah was wearing the dress Alex had bought her for their anniversary last year. The caption read, "When you find someone who makes you laugh until your stomach hurts." #blessed #new chapter. Alex scrolled through the comments. Several people had congratulated them on their relationship, calling them a perfect couple, asking when they were going to make it official. One comment from a woman named Desiree Kern made Alex's chest tighten. "Sarah's so lucky to have found someone who appreciates her sense of humor. That video you sent was hilarious." So the video of Tommy's humiliation had been shared. His son's pain had become entertainment for Sarah's new social circle. Alex spent the next hour conducting a thorough background check on Brett Young. Military training had its benefits. Alex still maintained contacts in various agencies, and a few discreet phone calls revealed interesting information. Brett had been fired from 2 previous gyms for inappropriate relationships with married clients. He was currently 3 months behind on his car payments and had recently taken out a high-interest personal loan for $15,000. Most interesting of all, Brett Young had been asking questions about Alex's business. According to Alex's contact at the bank, Brett had attempted to get information about Apex Building Solutions' financial status, claiming to be a potential investor. The bank had, of course, refused to provide any details, but it painted a clear picture of Brett's intentions. Alex leaned back in his chair, processing the information. This wasn't just an affair born of passion or emotional connection. Brett Young was a predator who targeted wealthy married women, and Sarah had walked right into his trap. But instead of feeling sorry for his wife, Alex felt something colder. Sarah had chosen this. She'd chosen to humiliate their son, to betray their marriage, to destroy their family for a man who saw her as nothing more than a paycheck. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." Alex smiled that same calm smile from the morning. He typed back, "No problem. Take your time." Then he made a series of phone calls. The first was to his lawyer, Ian Brennan, who'd handled the legal aspects of Alex's business for years. Ian was discreet, thorough, and had a reputation for aggressive representation when needed. "Ian, I need to discuss some personal matters," Alex said when the lawyer answered. "Hypothetically, what would be the best way to protect my assets if I were facing a divorce?" "That's an interesting hypothetical," Ian replied carefully. "How time-sensitive is this hypothetical situation?" "Very." "I see. Well, hypothetically, the sooner we act, the better positioned you'd be. There are several strategies we could employ, but timing is crucial. How confident are you that divorce is inevitable?" Alex thought about Tommy's tears, about Sarah's cruel laughter, about the casual way she'd shared their son's humiliation with her lover. "Completely confident. Then I'd suggest we meet tomorrow morning. Bring all your financial documents, and we'll discuss your options." Hypothetically, of course. The second call was to Stuart Peters, a private investigator Alex had met through business connections. Stuart was ex-FBI, methodical, and completely uninterested in moral judgments. He dealt in facts and evidence. "Stuart, I need comprehensive surveillance on 2 individuals," Alex said. "I need to know everything. Where they go, who they see, what they do. I need it all documented with timestamps and photographs. Time frame, starting immediately, ongoing until I say stop." "Understood. Send me the details, and I'll have a team in place by tonight." The third call was to his accountant, where Alex began the process of restructuring his business assets. Perfectly legal maneuvers that would make it very difficult for Sarah to claim half of everything he'd built. By the time Alex left the office, he had the framework of a plan in place. But this wasn't just about protecting himself financially. This was about justice. This was about making sure that people who hurt innocent children face consequences. As he drove to pick up Tommy's birthday cake, an elaborate chocolate creation from the best bakery in town, Alex thought about the next phase of his strategy. Sarah and Brett Young had underestimated him, had seen him as just another clueless husband who could be manipulated and discarded. They had no idea they were dealing with a man who'd spent 2 decades learning how to neutralize threats. When Alex arrived home, he found Tommy sitting at the kitchen table, working on homework with the focused concentration of a child trying to forget a bad day. His son's face lit up when he saw the cake box. "Is that for me?" Tommy asked. "Happy birthday, buddy," Alex said, setting the box on the counter. The real celebration starts now. As they shared cake and Alex listened to Tommy talk about his day at school, Alex felt his resolve solidify. This boy deserved better than a mother who would humiliate him for entertainment and grandparents who would laugh at his pain. He deserved a father who would fight for him, who would create a better life for both of them. Sarah came home at midnight, slipping into bed beside Alex with the satisfied exhaustion of someone who'd had a very good evening. She smelled like expensive cologne that wasn't Alex's brand. "How was work?" Alex asked quietly in the darkness. "Exhausting," Sarah murmured, "but productive." We're making progress on the Morrison account. Alex knew there was no Morrison account. He'd checked. I'm glad, he said, and meant it. Every lie Sarah told, every deception she added to the pile, would make what came next easier to justify. Sweet dreams. As Sarah drifted off to sleep beside him, Alex stared at the ceiling and finalized his plans. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Chapter 3. The Foundation. The next morning brought the first tangible results of Alex's investigation. Stuart Peters had worked quickly, and the photographs he delivered painted a clear picture of Sarah and Brett's relationship. The gym sessions that ran late into the evening, the hotel visits during Sarah's supposed client lunches, the intimate dinners at restaurants across town where they thought they wouldn't be recognized. But it was the video footage that truly captured Alex's attention. Stuart had managed to record Sarah and Brett at a coffee shop, laughing over Sarah's phone as they replayed the video of Tommy's birthday humiliation. Brett's reaction was particularly telling. He'd thrown his head back in genuine amusement, slapping the table as if it were the funniest thing he'd ever seen. The boy needs to toughen up anyway. Brett's voice came through clearly on the recording. Kids today are too soft. A little embarrassment builds character. Sarah had nodded enthusiastically. Exactly what I told Alex. He's always coddling Tommy. The kid needs to learn how the real world works. Alex closed the laptop and looked across his office at Ian Brennan, who'd been reviewing the financial documents they'd spent the morning organizing. This is solid evidence of adultery, Ian said, tapping the stack of photographs. In this state, that gives us significant leverage. Combined with the asset restructuring we've implemented, you'll be in a very strong position. What about custody? Alex asked. Given the evidence of Sarah's casual cruelty toward your son, documented in her own words and actions, I'd say you have an excellent chance of primary custody, especially with your military background and stable business ownership. You're exactly the kind of father courts prefer to see you raising children. Alex nodded, but his mind was already moving beyond the legal aspects of divorce. Sarah and Brett had made this personal when they'd humiliated Tommy. They crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed with paperwork and court orders. Ian, I need you to handle something else for me, Alex said. I want to buy Brett Yang's debt. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. His debt? He owes $15,000 on a personal loan, 3 months behind on his car payments, and I imagine he has credit card debt as well. I want to purchase all of it through intermediary companies so he doesn't know I'm involved. That's unusual and potentially expensive. What's your goal? Alex's smile was cold and patient. Control. When you own someone's debt, you own them. I want Brett Yang to understand exactly how precarious his position is. I can make some calls, Ian said carefully. But Alex, whatever you're planning, make sure it stays within legal boundaries. You don't want to give Sarah ammunition in custody proceedings. Everything I do will be perfectly legal, Alex assured him. I'm not interested in breaking the law. I'm interested in using it to my advantage. After Ian left, Alex spent the afternoon researching Brett Yang's gym, Elite Fitness. The business was struggling. High overhead, expensive equipment loans, and declining membership numbers. The owner, Eduardo Hoyt, was a former bodybuilder who'd invested everything he had into the gym and was now facing financial difficulties. Alex called Eduardo and arranged a meeting for the following day, presenting himself as a potential investor interested in the fitness industry. It wasn't entirely false. Alex had been considering diversifying his business portfolio, and gyms could be profitable with proper management. That evening, Alex took Tommy out for dinner at their favorite restaurant, just the two of them. His son was still subdued from the morning's humiliation, but he perked up when Alex let him order dessert without finishing his vegetables. Dad, why did Mom put dog food in my cake? Tommy asked between bites of ice cream. Alex had been dreading this question, but he'd prepared for it. Sometimes people make choices that hurt others, even when they don't mean to. Your mom thought it would be funny, but she didn't think about how it would make you feel. Grandpa and Grandma thought it was funny too. I know, buddy, and that wasn't right either. You know what, though? You handled it with more dignity than any of them showed. I'm proud of you for that. Tommy considered this seriously, the way children do when they're trying to understand the complex motivations of adults. Are you mad at Mom? Alex chose his words carefully. I'm disappointed that she hurt your feelings, and I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen again. Promise. Promise. When they returned home, Sarah was in the living room, lounging on the couch with her phone. She barely looked up when they entered. How was dinner? She asked, but her tone suggested she was asking out of obligation rather than interest. Good, Alex replied. Tommy, why don't you go get ready for bed? I'll be up to read with you in a few minutes. After Tommy had gone upstairs, Alex sat down across from Sarah. She was scrolling through social media, occasionally smiling at something on her screen. We need to talk about this morning, Alex said. Sarah sighed heavily, as if the conversation was an imposition. Alex, I already told you, it was just a joke. You're making way too big a deal out of this. Our son was humiliated on his birthday. My parents filmed it. You shared it with your friends. How is that not a big deal? For the first time, Sarah looked directly at him, and Alex caught a flash of something cold in her eyes. Maybe if Tommy wasn't so sensitive, it wouldn't have been such a problem. And maybe if you didn't coddle him so much, he'd be able to handle a little teasing. Teasing. Alex kept his voice level, but inside his resolve crystallized further. Sarah, you gave our 8-year-old son dog food instead of a birthday cake, and then laughed when he cried. That's not teasing. That's cruelty. Sarah's cheeks flushed, but with anger rather than shame. Oh, please. One disappointing moment isn't going to traumatize him. Kids need to learn that life isn't always fair. If anything, I was doing him a favor by preparing him for reality. Alex studied his wife's face, looking for any sign of remorse, any indication that she understood the gravity of what she'd done. He found nothing but defensive irritation and self-justification. You're right, he said finally. Life isn't always fair. Sometimes people who think they're cleverer than everyone else discover that they've seriously miscalculated. Sarah's expression shifted slightly, as if she'd caught something in his tone that she couldn't quite identify. What's that supposed to mean? Alex stood up, still wearing that calm, patient smile. It means I'm going to go read to our son, and then I'm going to bed. We'll talk more tomorrow. As he headed upstairs, Alex heard Sarah's phone buzz with a text message, followed by her familiar laugh. No doubt Brett Young was entertaining her with more wisdom about child-rearing and relationship management. Let them laugh, Alex thought as he settled in beside Tommy to read the next chapter of Hatchet, their current bedtime book. Let them think they were so clever, so superior, so much smarter than the boring husband and father they were planning to discard. They had no idea they were dealing with a man who'd spent his adult life learning how to win against superior forces through superior planning. They had no idea that every laugh, every cruel comment, every moment of their shared amusement was being documented and cataloged as evidence. Most importantly, they had no idea that Alex Johnson was the kind of man who, once he'd identified an enemy, would pursue victory with the same methodical precision that had made him successful in both war and business. The foundation was laid. Now it was time to build. Chapter 4. The Structure Rises. Alex's meeting with Eduardo Hoyt at Elite Fitness went exactly as he'd hoped. The gym owner was desperate, facing foreclosure within 60 days unless he could find an investor or buyer. His desperation made him talkative, and within an hour, Alex had a complete picture of the gym's financial situation and Brett Yang's employment status. Brett's one of our most popular trainers, Eduardo explained as they toured the facility. The ladies love him, but honestly, he's been a bit of a problem lately. Always requesting time off, showing up late, spending too much time on personal calls during his shifts. Alex nodded sympathetically while mentally noting Brett's schedule, his client list, and the layout of the gym. The building was well constructed, in a prime location, and with proper management could be profitable. More importantly, it would give Alex direct control over Brett's livelihood. I'll need a few days to review the financials with my team, Alex told Eduardo. But I'm very interested. This could be exactly what I'm looking for. 2 days later, Alex owned Elite Fitness through a shell company. Eduardo was so grateful for the cash infusion that he gladly accepted Alex's suggestion to promote the gym's customer service standards and implement stricter employment policies. Brett Young had no idea his new boss was the husband of the woman he was sleeping with. Meanwhile, Stuart Peters continued his surveillance, providing Alex with a detailed timeline of Sarah and Brett's affair. They met 3 times a week, Mondays at the Marriott downtown, Wednesdays at Brett's apartment, and Fridays at various restaurants around the city. Sarah had even taken vacation days to spend full afternoons with Brett, lying to Alex about spa visits and shopping trips with friends. The most damaging evidence came from a recording Stuart had made at Brett's apartment. Through a directional microphone, he'd captured a conversation that revealed the true scope of Sarah and Brett's planning. "He's such a pushover," Sarah's voice was clear on the recording. 20 years of marriage, and he's never stood up to me once. When I file for divorce, he'll probably just roll over and agree to whatever I ask for. What about the kid?" Brett's voice carried casual indifference. "Tommy? Alex can have him. I never wanted children anyway. The whole mother thing was just part of the package deal. Now that I've found someone who actually understands me, I don't need to pretend anymore." Alex had listened to this recording 3 times, each playback strengthening his resolve. Sarah wasn't just betraying their marriage. She was planning to abandon their son. Tommy would grow up knowing his mother had chosen another man over him, had walked away without a fight. That was unacceptable. Alex's next move was psychological. He began subtly altering Sarah's routine, creating small disruptions that would increase her stress and push her toward making mistakes. He rescheduled contractors to work on their house during times when Sarah usually met Brett, forcing her to find excuses to leave. He arranged for Tommy's school events to conflict with her planned afternoons away. He even had their credit cards temporarily flagged for suspicious activity, creating hassles when she tried to pay for hotel rooms. None of these actions were overtly suspicious, but together they created a pattern of frustration that began affecting Sarah's mood and judgment. "Why is everything falling apart lately?" Sarah complained one evening after a particularly difficult day. Her credit card had been declined at lunch. The house alarm had malfunctioned during a planned rendezvous with Brett, and she'd received a notice that her gym membership needed updating. "Just bad luck, I guess," Alex replied, not looking up from the financial reports he was reviewing. "These things happen in clusters sometimes." Sarah studied his face suspiciously. "It's like someone's deliberately sabotaging my schedule." Alex glanced up with apparent concern. "That's a strange thing to say. Who would want to sabotage your schedule?" "I don't know. It just feels coordinated. Maybe you're just stressed from work," Alex suggested. "The Morrison account has been keeping you busy lately." Sarah's expression tightened slightly. She'd forgotten that she'd claimed to be working on a non-existent account. "Right, the Morrison account. It's been challenging. I'm sure you'll figure it out," Alex said, returning to his papers. "You always do." But Sarah's paranoia was growing, and paranoid people made mistakes. Alex was counting on it. At the gym, Brett was experiencing his own set of frustrations. His new management had implemented strict policies about punctuality, customer service, and appropriate relationships with clients. 3 written warnings for various infractions had appeared in his personnel file, each one documented with security camera footage and witness statements. "It's like they're watching my every move," Brett complained to Sarah during one of their Wednesday afternoon meetings. "The new owner is some kind of control freak. Everything has to be perfect. Everything has to be documented." "At least you have job security," Sarah replied, but her tone was distracted. She was thinking about the series of small disasters that had been plaguing her schedule. "For now, but one more write-up and I'm out." They made that very clear. Alex, listening to this conversation through Stuart's surveillance equipment, smiled with satisfaction. Brett was walking a tightrope, and Alex controlled both ends of the rope. The debt acquisition had also been successful. Through a series of intermediary companies, Alex now owned Brett's car loan, his personal loan, and had purchased his credit card debt from the original issuer. Brett had no idea that his financial obligations now ran directly to the man whose wife he was seducing. Phase 2 of Alex's plan was ready to implement. Late one evening, as Sarah slept beside him, Alex received a text from an unknown number. "Your wife is cheating on you. Elite Fitness, Tuesday, 3 p.m. Check the Marriott downtown if you want proof." Alex deleted the message and smiled in the darkness. Anonymous tips were so useful especially when they came from fictional concerned citizens who happened to know exactly when and where to look for evidence. Tomorrow, Alex would play the role of the suspicious husband, conducting his own investigation and discovering his wife's betrayal. He would be shocked, hurt, and desperate for guidance. The perfect setup for what would come next. Sarah and Brett had no idea they were about to spring their own trap. Chapter 5. The Walls Close In. Alex's performance as the devastated husband discovering his wife's affair was flawless. He followed Sarah to the Marriott on Tuesday afternoon, timing his arrival to catch her and Brett entering the elevator together. The security cameras captured his apparent shock, his hands trembling as he approached the front desk, his voice breaking as he asked which room his wife had checked into. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't provide guest information," the desk clerk had said. "Please," Alex had replied, his voice perfectly pitched between hurt and desperate. "I think my wife is here with another man. I just need to know if I'm losing my mind." The desk clerk, a young woman named Cara Mays, had taken pity on him. While she couldn't provide room numbers, she could confirm that a Sarah Johnson had indeed checked in that afternoon with a male companion. Alex had thanked her profusely, handed her a $100 tip, and left the hotel looking like a broken man. The security footage would show exactly what any reasonable person would expect to see: a loyal husband discovering the worst betrayal possible. That evening, Alex confronted Sarah with the evidence he'd gathered. He sat her down in their living room, his hands visibly shaking, his voice carefully modulated to convey hurt rather than anger. "I followed you today," he said quietly. "I know about Brett Young." Sarah's face went through a rapid series of expressions: surprise, panic, calculation, and finally defiance. "How long have you known?" "I've suspected for a while, but today confirmed it." "Sarah, we've been married for 10 years. We have a son together. How could you do this to our family?" Instead of remorse, Sarah's expression hardened into something cold and determined. "Because I'm not happy, Alex. I haven't been happy for years. Brett makes me feel alive again. Makes me feel like the woman I used to be before I got trapped in this suburban housewife nightmare." Alex blinked as if he'd been slapped. "Trapped? Sarah, we built this life together. We planned it together." "You planned it," Sarah corrected. "I went along with it because I thought it was what I was supposed to want. But I'm done pretending. I'm done living a lie for the sake of appearances." "What about Tommy?" Sarah's expression didn't soften. "Tommy will be fine. Kids adapt. He'll probably be better off with you anyway. You're the one who actually enjoys playing house." Alex let his shoulders slump, playing the role of the defeated husband. "So what happens now?" "Now, I'm going to be honest for the first time in years," Sarah said, standing up and pacing to the window. "I want a divorce, Alex. I want to start over with someone who actually appreciates me. Someone like Brett Young. Yes, someone like Brett." Alex was quiet for a long moment, letting the silence stretch between them. "Can I ask you something? And will you give me an honest answer?" Sarah turned back to him, and for just a moment, her expression softened slightly. "What? Was any of it real? Our marriage, our family, was any of it real for you?" Sarah considered the question, and when she answered, her voice carried a finality that confirmed everything Alex had suspected. "I thought it was at the time, but looking back, I think I was just playing a role that everyone expected me to play. Brett helped me realize that I don't have to keep pretending to be someone I'm not." Alex nodded slowly, as if processing this devastating revelation. "I see. And the thing with Tommy's birthday cake, was that part of being your authentic self?" A flicker of discomfort crossed Sarah's face. "That was just, I was stressed. Brett said Tommy needed to toughen up, and I guess I let that influence me too much. Brett has opinions about how to raise our son. He's been around kids before. He knows what he's talking about." Alex filed this information away with everything else. Sarah was so deep in her fantasy that she was taking parenting advice from a man who had no children and no apparent interest in having any. "What do you want from me?" Alex asked quietly. "I want you to make this easy," Sarah replied. "I want us to handle this like adults. We'll split everything fairly, figure out custody arrangements, and move on with our lives." Alex nodded as if he were considering this reasonable proposal. "I'll need some time to process all of this." It's a lot to take in. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Alex, I hope you understand that my mind is made up. This isn't something I'm doing impulsively. I've thought about it for months. After Sarah went upstairs, presumably to text Brett about the conversation, Alex sat alone in his living room and felt a cold satisfaction settle over him. Sarah had just made several critical mistakes. She'd admitted to adultery without any coercion. She'd expressed her intention to abandon their son. Most importantly, she'd revealed that Brett Young was influencing her decisions about Tommy's welfare. Any family court judge would find Sarah's casual attitude toward her son's emotional needs deeply troubling. But Alex wasn't content to simply win a custody battle. Sarah and Brett had hurt his child, had laughed at Tommy's pain, had planned to tear apart his family for their own selfish desires. Legal victory wasn't enough. They needed to understand that actions had consequences and that some people couldn't be manipulated or discarded without repercussions. The next phase of Alex's plan required precision, timing, and careful orchestration. Over the following week, he began implementing a series of moves that would systematically dismantle both Sarah and Brett's carefully constructed lives. At Elite Fitness, Brett received his final warning for inappropriate conduct with female clients. Security cameras had captured him exchanging personal phone numbers with married women, using gym equipment during off hours without authorization, and spending excessive time in private training sessions that involved more conversation than exercise. One more incident and you're terminated, Eduardo informed him. The new ownership is very strict about maintaining professional standards. Brett was furious but powerless. He needed the job, especially with his mounting debt obligations. What he didn't know was that those debts were about to become much more demanding. Alex's intermediary companies began calling in Brett's loans simultaneously. His car loan was accelerated due to missed payments. His personal loan was declared in default, and his credit card were frozen pending review of his account status. Within a single week, Brett went from financial stress to financial crisis. How can they all demand payment at once? Brett asked Sarah during one of their increasingly tense meetings. It's like they're coordinating against me. Maybe it's just bad timing, Sarah replied, but she was dealing with her own mysterious problems. Her credit score had suddenly dropped due to irregularities in her financial history. Her company's HR department had received an anonymous tip about her falsified expense reports, leading to an internal investigation. Even her gym membership had been revoked due to a clerical error that would take weeks to resolve. Both Sarah and Brett were beginning to feel like they were under siege, but neither could identify the source of their troubles. Their stress was affecting their relationship, creating tension and blame where there had once been passion and excitement. Alex watched it all unfold with the patience of a man who understood that the best victories were those where your enemies defeated themselves. He was simply providing the pressure that revealed their true characters. The final phase was ready to begin. Chapter 6: The Trap Springs. The anonymous letter arrived at Sarah's workplace on a Thursday morning, delivered by a courier service that had no record of who had paid for the delivery. It was addressed to her personally and marked confidential, personal matter. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a brief message printed in generic font. Your husband knows everything. He's been planning his revenge for weeks. Check your bank accounts. Check your credit report. Ask yourself why everything in your life is suddenly falling apart. Get out now before it's too late. Sarah's hands trembled as she read the message twice, then a third time. She immediately called Brett, who was dealing with his own crisis at the gym. We need to meet, she said, her voice tight with panic. Something's wrong. Something's very wrong. They met at a coffee shop across town, both looking haggard and suspicious. Sarah showed Brett the letter, and his face went pale as he read it. This explains everything, Brett said, his voice hollow. The job problems, the loan issues, the surveillance at work. He's been orchestrating this whole thing. But how? Alex doesn't have the connections or the knowledge to pull off something like this. He builds houses. He was military, Brett reminded her. Special forces guys learn all kinds of skills. And he's got money, Sarah. Rich people can buy any kind of help they need. Sarah felt a chill of real fear. She'd always seen Alex as predictable, controllable, the kind of man who would accept whatever life handed him without fighting back. The idea that he might be actively working against her was terrifying. "What do we do?" she asked. Brett was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "We accelerate our timeline. You file for divorce immediately, before he can make any more moves. We take whatever we can get and disappear." "Disappear where?" "I've got connections in other states. We can start over somewhere else, somewhere he can't reach us." Sarah felt her carefully constructed fantasy beginning to crumble. Instead of a romantic new beginning with Brett, she was facing the prospect of running away like a criminal, abandoning her comfortable life and her son for an uncertain future with a man she was beginning to realize she barely knew. "What about Tommy?" she asked. Brett's expression hardened. "What about him? You said yourself he'd be better off with his father. This just makes it official." The casual way he dismissed her son's welfare was like a slap in the face. "Brett, he's my child. And he's Alex's child, too. Look, Sarah, we always knew this was going to be complicated. But if your husband is really as dangerous as this letter suggests, then staying here isn't an option. We take what we can get and go, or we risk losing everything." That evening, Sarah returned home to find Alex in his study, calmly reviewing documents. Tommy was upstairs doing homework, and the house felt peaceful, normal. It was hard to reconcile this domestic tranquility with the image of Alex as a ruthless manipulator orchestrating her downfall. "Alex, we need to talk," she said from the doorway. He looked up with what appeared to be genuine surprise. "Of course. Come in." Sarah entered the study and closed the door behind her. "I've decided I want to proceed with the divorce immediately. I've already contacted a lawyer." Alex's expression shifted to what looked like resignation mixed with sadness. "I see. I was hoping we might try counseling first, but if your mind is made up..." "It is. I want this to be as straightforward as possible. We split the assets 50-50. I take my personal belongings, and we work out a custody arrangement for Tommy." "What kind of custody arrangement were you thinking?" Sarah hesitated. This was the moment where she would reveal her true intentions. "I think Tommy would be better off with you as the primary guardian. I'll take visitation rights, of course, but you're more suited to daily parenting responsibilities." Alex was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a note of genuine confusion. "Sarah, are you saying you don't want custody of our son?" "I'm saying I want what's best for him. And what's best for him is stability, routine, a parent who can be there consistently. You can provide that better than I can." "Because you're planning to leave town?" Sarah's eyes sharpened. "What makes you say that?" "Just a feeling. The way you're talking, it sounds like you're planning to start completely over somewhere else." The conversation was making Sarah increasingly uncomfortable. Alex seemed surprised by her decisions rather than triumphant, confused rather than calculating. Either he was an exceptional actor, or the anonymous letter had been wrong about his involvement in her recent troubles. "I just want us both to be able to move forward with our lives," she said carefully. "I understand. And Sarah, despite everything that's happened, I want you to be happy. If Brett Young makes you happy, then I hope things work out for you." The casual mention of Brett's name hit Sarah like a physical blow. Alex knew about Brett, had known all along, but his tone carried no anger or threat, just tired acceptance. "How long have you known?" she asked. "A few weeks. I had you followed. And you didn't say anything?" Alex shrugged. "What was I supposed to say? That I wanted you to stay with someone who clearly didn't want to be here? That I wanted to force you to pretend to love me and our son?" Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she wasn't sure if they were from guilt, relief, or confusion. "Alex, I never meant for things to happen this way. I know. These things rarely happen the way we plan them." Alex paused, then continued in a quieter voice. "Can I ask you one favor?" "What?" "Don't disappear without saying goodbye to Tommy. Whatever happens between us, he deserves to hear from you that it's not his fault." Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. The conversation wasn't going anything like she'd expected. Instead of the confrontation she'd braced for, Alex was being reasonable, understanding, even kind. It was making her question everything Brett had told her about Alex's supposed revenge campaign. After Sarah left the study, Alex sat back in his chair and smiled. The performance had been perfect. Sarah was now completely off balance, questioning her assumptions, doubting Brett's judgment. The anonymous letter had done exactly what Alex had intended. It had forced Sarah and Brett to reveal their true characters under pressure. Brett had immediately suggested running away, abandoning Tommy without a second thought. Sarah had been willing to consider it. Both of them had shown that when faced with consequences for their actions, their first instinct was to flee rather than take responsibility. It was exactly the evidence Alex needed for the final phase of his plan. Tomorrow, everything would come together. Sarah and Brett had played their parts perfectly, never realizing they were following a script Alex had written from the beginning. The trap had sprung. Now it was time to collect what he was owed. Chapter 7. The Reckoning Begins. Alex's plan reached its crescendo on a Friday afternoon when multiple carefully orchestrated events converged with military precision. He'd spent weeks positioning the pieces, and now it was time to watch them fall. At exactly 2:30 p.m., Brett Young received a phone call at Elite Fitness from a debt collection agency, informing him that all his loans had been consolidated and were now due in full within 48 hours. The total amount was $63,000, far more than Brett had realized he owed due to accelerated interest and penalties. "There must be some mistake," Brett protested. "I need to speak to a supervisor." "The loans have been purchased by a private investment firm," the collection agent explained. "They have the legal right to demand immediate payment. If you cannot comply, repossession proceedings will begin Monday morning." At the same time, Sarah was sitting in her divorce attorney's office, receiving devastating news about her legal position. The lawyer, Tony Black, was one of the most expensive in the city, but his expression was grim as he reviewed Alex's financial disclosures. "Mrs. Johnson, I'm afraid your husband has restructured his assets in a way that significantly limits what you can claim in a divorce settlement," Tony explained. "His business holdings have been moved into trusts and LLCs that predate your marriage. Most of your joint assets appear to have been funded primarily by his earnings, which gives him considerable leverage." "But we've been married for 10 years, Sarah protested. "I contributed to building that life." "That's certainly an argument we can make, but the documentation suggests otherwise. Your husband has been very thorough in establishing the source of all marital assets. Additionally, we have the problem of the adultery evidence." Sarah's stomach dropped. "What adultery evidence?" Tony slid a thick folder across the desk. "Security camera footage, private investigator reports, financial records showing hotel payments and gifts to your boyfriend. Mrs. Johnson, your husband has documented everything. In a state where adultery affects both asset division and custody decisions, this evidence is devastating." Sarah opened the folder with trembling hands and saw photograph after photograph of her and Brett together. Hotel receipts with her signature, text message transcripts, even the video of Tommy's birthday humiliation, with timestamps showing when she'd shared it with Brett. "There's more," Tony continued. "Your husband has evidence that your boyfriend has been influencing your parenting decisions regarding your son. Family courts take a very dim view of that kind of outside interference in child welfare." Meanwhile, at Elite Fitness, Brett was experiencing his own catastrophe. Eduardo Hoyt called him into the office and handed him a termination notice, effective immediately. "I'm sorry, Brett, but the new ownership has made it clear that your employment here is no longer viable," Eduardo explained. "There have been too many incidents, too many violations of company policy." "This is insane," Brett protested. "I've been one of your best trainers for 3 years." "That may be true, but the new management has different standards. Your final paycheck will be ready Monday, minus deductions for equipment damage and policy violations." Brett stormed out of the gym, his phone buzzing with calls from creditors and collection agencies. His car had already been repossessed from the parking lot while he was being fired. His apartment lease was in jeopardy due to missed payments. In the span of 2 hours, his entire life had collapsed. He called Sarah in a panic. "We need to meet right now. Everything's falling apart." Sarah, still reeling from her attorney's revelations, agreed to meet at their usual coffee shop. When she arrived, Brett looked like a man on the edge of a breakdown. His face was pale, his hands shaking, his usual confident demeanor completely shattered. "They know everything," Brett said without preamble. "Your husband has been planning this for weeks, maybe months. He's destroyed my credit, got me fired, taken my car. I'm completely ruined. How could he have that kind of power?" Sarah asked, though her meeting with Tony Black had already answered that question. "Money and connections. I underestimated him completely. I thought he was just some boring contractor who wouldn't fight back. But he's been playing chess while we were playing checkers." Sarah showed Brett the evidence folder from her attorney's office. His face went ashen as he flipped through the photographs and documents. "We're screwed," he said flatly. "Completely and totally screwed." "There has to be something we can do," Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Some way to fight back." Brett laughed bitterly. "Fight back with what? I don't have a job, a car, or a place to live. And you're about to lose everything in the divorce. Your husband has made sure we have nothing left to fight with." The reality of their situation was settling over them both like a suffocating blanket. The passionate affair that had seemed so romantic and exciting just weeks ago now felt foolish and destructive. They'd traded their secure lives for a fantasy that had evaporated the moment it faced real consequences. "I have to go back to him," Sarah said quietly. "I have to try to fix this before it's too late." Brett's expression hardened. "Go back to him? Sarah, you filed for divorce. You told him you were leaving him for me. There's no going back from that. Maybe if I apologize, if I explain that I made a mistake, he's not going to forgive you. Look at what he's done to us. This isn't the work of someone who's interested in reconciliation. This is revenge, pure and simple." Sarah stared at the evidence folder, feeling the full weight of her choices. She convinced herself that Alex was weak, that he would simply accept whatever she decided to do. Instead, she'd awakened something implacable and ruthless, something that had systematically dismantled her life while she remained oblivious to the threat. "What about Tommy?" she asked. "What about him? You already told your husband he could have custody. The kid will be fine." The casual dismissal of her son's welfare was the final straw. Sarah looked at Brett Young, really looked at him, and saw him clearly for the first time. Without his confident swagger, without his easy charm, he was just a selfish man who'd convinced her to destroy her family for his own gratification. "I need to go home," she said, standing up from the table. "Sarah, wait. We can figure this out. Maybe if we leave town tonight, start over somewhere else. With what money? You just said yourself we have nothing left." Brett's desperation was palpable. "I'll figure something out. I always do. But we can't give up now. Not when we've come this far." Sarah looked at this man who'd promised her a new life, who'd convinced her to abandon her family, who was now suggesting they run away like criminals. The fantasy was completely dead now, replaced by the harsh reality of consequences and regret. "Goodbye, Brett," she said and walked away. As Sarah drove home, she tried to prepare herself for what would likely be the most difficult conversation of her life. She'd betrayed her husband, abandoned her son, and destroyed her family for a man who'd proven to be nothing more than a coward when faced with adversity. But the worst part was knowing that Alex had been right about Brett all along. And Alex had been planning this confrontation from the beginning, had seen through both of them with a clarity that made her feel foolish and naive. She pulled into her driveway and sat in the car for several minutes, staring at the house she'd taken for granted, thinking about the family she'd been so eager to discard. Through the front window, she could see Alex helping Tommy with his homework at the kitchen table, both of them focused and content. It was a scene of domestic peace that she'd scorned just days ago. Now it looked like everything she'd lost and might never get back. Sarah took a deep breath and prepared to face the consequences of her choices. Chapter 8. The Price of Betrayal. Sarah found Alex exactly where she'd seen him through the window, sitting at the kitchen table with Tommy, working through a math worksheet. The scene was so normal, so comfortable, that it made her chest ache with regret. This was what she'd thrown away. Not just a marriage, but a family, a home, a life that she'd been too selfish to value. "Dad, I don't understand this one," Tommy was saying, pointing to a word problem about calculating the area of a rectangle. "Let's break it down," Alex replied patiently. "What information does the problem give us?" Sarah watched this interaction for a moment, remembering when she used to be part of these evening routines. When had she stopped caring about Tommy's homework, about his small daily struggles and victories? When had she started seeing her own family as an obstacle to her happiness instead of the foundation of it? "Alex, can we talk?" she said from the doorway. Both Alex and Tommy looked up. Alex's expression was neutral, but Tommy's face brightened with genuine pleasure at seeing his mother. "Mom, want to help with my math? Dad's really good at explaining it." Sarah felt her throat tighten. "Maybe later, sweetheart. I need to talk to your dad first." Alex stood up, ruffling Tommy's hair. "Keep working on that one, buddy. I'll be right back." They went into Alex's study, where Sarah had initiated so many conversations over the years. Now the room felt different, charged with tension and unspoken accusations. Alex closed the door and turned to face her, his expression calm but watchful. "How did your meeting with the lawyer go?" he asked. Sarah was startled by the directness of the question. "You know about that?" "Sarah, I've known about everything from the beginning. Your affair with Brett Young, your plans to leave, your intention to abandon Tommy. I've been waiting for you to be honest about it." The word abandon hit Sarah like a physical blow. "I wasn't abandoning Tommy. I thought he'd be better off with you." "Better off? Or more convenient for your new life?" Sarah couldn't meet his eyes. "Alex, I know I've made terrible mistakes. I know I've hurt you and Tommy, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Are you sorry because you regret your choices? Or because those choices have consequences?" The question was devastating in its accuracy. Sarah realized she didn't know the answer, and that uncertainty terrified her. "I want to try to fix this," she said quietly. "I want to find a way to make things right." Alex studied her face for a long moment. "Do you love Brett Young?" I thought I did, but I don't think I really knew him. When everything started falling apart, he just wanted to run away. He was willing to abandon Tommy without a second thought. And that surprised you?" Sarah's cheeks burned with shame. "Yes. No. I don't know. I wasn't thinking clearly about any of this." "You were thinking clearly enough to humiliate our son on his birthday. You were thinking clearly enough to share that humiliation with your boyfriend. You were thinking clearly enough to plan a life that didn't include Tommy." Each accusation was delivered in the same calm, measured tone, but they cut deeper than shouting would have. Sarah felt tears starting to fall, but Alex's expression didn't soften. "I know," she whispered. "I know I was cruel to him. I know I was a terrible mother. But Alex, I want to try to be better. I want to try to fix this family." "Why?" The single word hung in the air between them. Sarah realized that Alex was asking her to examine her true motivations, to be honest about whether her desire for reconciliation was genuine or just another form of self-preservation. "Because I love you," she said finally. "Because I love Tommy. Because I threw away the most important things in my life for something that was never real." Alex was quiet for a long time, and when he spoke, his voice carried a finality that made Sarah's heart sink. "Sarah, there's something you need to understand. I could forgive you for betraying me. I could probably even forgive you for the affair, for the lies, for choosing another man over our marriage. But I will never forgive you for what you did to Tommy. Alex, please. You humiliated our 8-year-old son on his birthday. You laughed while he cried. You shared his pain with your boyfriend as entertainment. And when you thought about your future with Brett, you saw Tommy as an inconvenience to be discarded." Sarah felt the weight of those accusations settling over her like a suffocating blanket. "I know I was wrong. I know I hurt him. But children forgive, don't they? Can I try to make it up to him? Tommy does forgive easily. He's a good kid with a generous heart. But I'm his father, and my job is to protect him from people who would hurt him, even if one of those people is his mother." The finality in Alex's voice was terrifying. Sarah realized that she'd fundamentally misunderstood the man she'd married. She'd seen his kindness as weakness, his patience as passivity. She'd never considered that beneath that calm exterior was a core of absolute resolve when it came to protecting the people he loved. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you make a choice," Alex said. "You can fight the divorce, try to claim assets you have no legal right to, attempt to get custody of a child you've already demonstrated you don't want. You can make this ugly and painful for everyone involved. or where you can accept the settlement I'm offering. You get your personal belongings, your car, and $50,000 to help you start over. In exchange, you sign away any claim to marital assets and agree to supervise visitation with Tommy until he's old enough to decide for himself whether he wants a relationship with you. Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Supervised visitation? You've demonstrated poor judgment regarding Tommy's welfare. You've shown that you prioritize adult relationships over his emotional needs. Until you can prove otherwise, any contact with our son will be supervised by a court-appointed guardian. The proposal was devastating but not unreasonable. Sarah knew that any family court judge would reach similar conclusions based on the evidence Alex had gathered. Her choices had painted a clear picture of a mother who was willing to abandon her child for personal gratification. And if I don't agree, then we go to court, where a judge will see all the evidence of your adultery, your abandonment of Tommy, and your plan to leave the state with a man who has no legal right to influence decisions about her son's welfare. You'll get less money, lose any chance of meaningful custody, and Tommy will have to testify about how you made him feel when you gave him dog food for his birthday. The thought of Tommy having to relive that humiliation in court was unbearable. Sarah realized that Alex had constructed this choice carefully, making the path of least resistance also the path that would cause the least additional trauma to their son. "I need time to think," she said. "Of course. But Sarah, understand that this offer expires in 48 hours. After that, we do this the hard way." As Sarah prepared to leave the study, Alex spoke one more time. "There's one more thing you should know. Brett Young has been completely cut off from all financial resources. His credit is destroyed, his employment terminated, his debts called in. He has nothing left and no way to rebuild." Sarah turned back to face him. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to understand that running away with him isn't an option anymore. Your fantasy is over, Sarah. Now you have to live in the real world, where actions have consequences and people who hurt children face justice." Sarah left the study feeling like she'd been hollowed out from the inside. She'd entered the conversation hoping for forgiveness, for a chance to rebuild her family. Instead, she discovered that she'd married a man far more formidable than she'd ever imagined. A man who'd systematically dismantled her life while giving her every opportunity to make better choices. As she packed her belongings that night, Sarah could hear Alex reading to Tommy in the next room, their voices carrying the easy comfort of a father and son who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. It was a relationship she'd taken for granted, a bond she'd been willing to sacrifice for her own selfish desires. Now it was lost to her, possibly forever. Chapter 9. The Last Laugh. 6 months later, Alex stood in the kitchen of their house, his house now, watching Tommy blow out 9 candles on an elaborate superhero-themed birthday cake. The boy's face was radiant with happiness, surrounded by friends from school and teammates from his Little League team. The contrast with the previous year's humiliation couldn't have been more complete. "Make a wish, buddy," Alex said, his hand resting gently on his son's shoulder. Tommy closed his eyes, concentrated for a moment, then blew out all the candles in one breath. The room erupted in cheers and applause. "What did you wish for?" asked Austin Yoder, Tommy's best friend. "Can't tell you, or it won't come true," Tommy replied with the wisdom of 9 years. But he looked up at his father with a smile that suggested his most important wish had already been granted. The past 6 months had been a period of healing and rebuilding for both of them. Tommy had struggled initially with his mother's absence, asking difficult questions about why she'd chosen to leave. Alex had been honest, but age-appropriate in his explanations, focusing on the fact that sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people they love, but that didn't mean the hurt was deserved or permanent. Sarah had signed the divorce settlement without contesting it. The supervised visitation arrangements had been used exactly twice, both awkward, stilted encounters that left Tommy confused and upset. After the second visit, Sarah had stopped requesting them altogether. She'd moved to another state, ostensibly to start fresh, though Alex suspected she was simply running from the consequences of her choices. Brett Young had disappeared entirely. His financial ruin had been complete and irreversible. The debt consolidation had triggered a cascade of legal and personal problems that left him unable to remain in the city. Stuart Peters had tracked him to a small town in Nevada, where he was apparently working construction for minimum wage and living in a studio apartment. The fitness instructor who'd once seduced wealthy married women was now just another middle-aged man struggling to pay rent. Alex felt no sympathy for either of them. They'd made their choices with full knowledge of the potential consequences. They'd chosen cruelty over kindness, selfishness over responsibility, fantasy over reality. The fact that their choices had led to predictable outcomes was justice, not tragedy. "Dad, can we play baseball in the backyard?" Tommy asked as the party began winding down. "Absolutely. Let me help clean up first, then we'll get the gloves." As Alex cleared cake plates and picked up wrapping paper, he reflected on the lessons of the past year. He'd learned that patience and planning were more powerful than anger and impulse. He'd learned that people revealed their true characters under pressure, and that character was destiny. Most importantly, he'd learned that protecting the innocent sometimes required being ruthless with the guilty. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Alex opened it, curious. "I know what you did to us. I know how you destroyed our lives. This isn't over." Alex smiled and deleted the message. Brett Young, apparently. The man still didn't understand that his life had been destroyed by his own choices, not by Alex's response to them. Some people never learned to take responsibility for their actions. Alex typed a brief reply. "Your threats are documented and will be forwarded to local authorities. Any further contact will be considered harassment. Move on with your life." Then he blocked the number and forgot about it. Brett Young was yesterday's problem, and Alex had more important things to focus on. Tommy appeared at his elbow, baseball glove in hand. "Ready, Dad?" "Ready." They went into the backyard, where the late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the grass. Alex pitched gently while Tommy practiced his swing, both of them laughing when the ball sailed over the fence into the neighbor's yard. "I'm getting better, aren't I?" Tommy asked as they retrieved the ball. "You're getting much better. Keep practicing, and you'll be starting shortstop next season. Will you come to all my games?" "Every single one," Alex promised. "That's what dads do." Tommy beamed at this assurance, and Alex felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge or justice. This was what victory actually looked like, not the destruction of enemies, but the protection of innocence, the preservation of love, the building of a life worth living. As they played catch in the fading light, Alex thought about the future he was building with his son. Tommy would grow up knowing that his father would fight for him, would protect him, would never abandon him for personal convenience. He would learn that actions had consequences, that loyalty was rewarded, and that some things were worth fighting for. He would also learn that some people couldn't be trusted, that some wounds couldn't be healed with forgiveness alone, and that sometimes the only way to stop a bully was to demonstrate that their actions would have costs they couldn't afford to pay. These were hard lessons, but necessary ones. The world could be cruel, but it was also fair in its own way. People who treated others with kindness and respect generally found kindness and respect returned. People who chose cruelty and betrayal generally found themselves alone with the consequences of their choices. Sarah had learned this lesson too late. Brett Young was still learning it. But Tommy would grow up understanding it from the beginning, which would make him stronger, wiser, and better prepared for whatever challenges life might bring. As the sun set and they headed inside for dinner, Alex reflected on the justice of it all. A year ago, he'd been a man whose family was being quietly destroyed by people who saw his kindness as weakness. Today, he was a single father raising a happy, healthy son in a home filled with love and security. Sarah was alone in another state, probably telling herself that she was the victim of circumstances beyond her control. Brett Young was working manual labor and living in poverty, no doubt blaming Alex for consequences that were entirely the result of his own actions. But Alex and Tommy were together, building a life based on mutual respect, genuine affection, and unwavering loyalty. They were the ones who had truly won. That night, as Alex tucked Tommy into bed, his son looked up at him with serious eyes. "Dad, are you happy?" Alex considered the question carefully. "Yes, buddy. I'm happy. Are you? Yeah. I like it being just us. It feels safe. Alex kissed his son's forehead and turned off the light. It is safe, and it always will be. As he walked downstairs, Alex smiled to himself. Sarah and Brett had thought they were so clever, so superior, so much smarter than the boring husband and father they were planning to discard. They'd had no idea they were dealing with a man who understood that the best revenge wasn't getting even. It was building something better than what had been destroyed. They'd given him dog food for his son's birthday, thinking it was just a joke. Alex had given them a masterclass in consequences, and he'd had the last laugh after all. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.